Good evening. The United States is under terrorist attack.
And we're just getting late word right now. Flashes of explosions in Kabul, Afghanistan. We do not know if it is retaliatory action. You can see right now on your screen symbols of American economic and military power came under withering strikes today in New York and Washington. Terrorists hijacking 4 civilian airlines this morning. They flew 2 of them into New York's World Trade Center Twin Towers. The cameras from many angles recording the horrific collisions. The towers were ripped open. They later burned and collapsed with terrible loss of life. Another airliner slammed into the Pentagon, the U.S. military headquarters near Washington, D.C. A 4th airliner crashed outside Pittsburgh. The death toll roughly estimated at 10,000, including souls on board the 4 aircraft, workers in the stricken buildings, and rescue workers trapped in the Trade Center towers when they collapsed. Another Trade Center tower collapsed this afternoon. A 4th continues to burn. Manhattan is covered in debris and ash. North American air travel has stopped. Financial markets are closed. President Bush has left at Omaha Air Force Base and is expected to address the nation from Washington at 9 tonight. U.S. forces are on highest alert. Aircraft carriers are patrolling the Atlantic off the East Coast. A stunned planet awaits the American response, but it is clear the world has entered a new and dangerous era. We have a series of reports from around the world and here at home. These reports contain graphic video of terrible disaster and suffering. First, Tom Hayes with what happened in New York.
It was horrifying. Flames and thick black smoke billowing from the top of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. It was 8:45 a.m. as 20,000 people were making their way to work in the towers. A United Airlines passenger plane from Boston crashes into the North Tower about 3/4 of the way up the 110-story structure. 18 minutes later, as all attention was focused on the North Tower, an American Airlines plane out of Boston approaching from the southwest turns and slams directly into the South Tower. The plane was captured by amateur video just before it hit.
There's another one. I'm taking a look.
Oh! Oh my God! Oh, shit! Oh my God!
Both planes were hijacked. There was a frantic call from a flight attendant from the second plane saying 2 flight attendants had been stabbed and that the hijackers had broken into the cockpit. As the flames spread, people could be seen hanging from the World Trade Center windows, desperately crying for help. Some could no longer hang on and plummeted to the ground. The towers are home to more than 500 international businesses. Thousands are feared lost. The Royal Bank says all of its people got out. Just an hour after the crashes, the South Tower, under the stress of another explosion, buckles, and the 110-story structure tumbles to the ground.
It's as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the 2 towers. A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
The collapse spews debris across lower Manhattan as the section of island disappears in a cloud of smoke.
Move it! Move it! Come on!
On the street, pandemonium. Hundreds of thousands of people running to escape lower Manhattan.
I was up on in my office on the northwest corner of the 82nd floor. I heard a noise like a sonic boom almost, and then a blast. The building swayed.
The devastation would continue as thousands frantically attempted to flee the area. Another explosion, this time in the North Tower. The force of the blast sends the North Tower to the street, wiping the World Trade Center, a world landmark, from the skyline of New York City. The island wasn't the only target. About 40 minutes after the Manhattan explosions, a plane crashed into the Pentagon. This was an American Airlines plane scheduled to fly from Washington to L.A. Then another plane down, this a United airliner that went down 80 miles south of Pittsburgh. As subways and public transit stopped, walking was the only way out. Thousands used the Brooklyn Bridge to escape the carnage in Manhattan. There was one other building involved, another tower, 47 stories high. It collapsed about an hour ago. It had been evacuated, however. The death toll will, of course, be in the thousands. What we know right now is 266 passengers and flight crew have been lost in the 4 planes. I'm Tom Hayes, back to the desk.
Thank you, Tom. Well, at the height of this morning's New York disaster, a doctor entered the blast zone to aid victims, just as one of the towers collapsed. Identified as Dr. Mark Keith, he carried a video camera and recorded his journey into a 21st century heart of darkness.
Getting behind a car. It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help. I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Yeah. Can I get a toot? I'm just getting a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Where are you?
Don't have oxygen.
Hey! Hello, Doc.
Hey, that guy needs...
A strike at the heart of the American military as a large area of the Pentagon burns. A plane crashed into the complex less than an hour after the attack on the World Trade Towers. That prompted an immediate evacuation. A direct hit on the Pentagon in the wake of the devastation in New York. A plane crashed into the southwestern side of the nerve center for American military operations. It is the Army section of the complex that houses 23,000 employees. Dozens of people are feared dead. Eyewitnesses say there was a huge fireball and the tail of a large aircraft could be seen just before the explosion. It is believed to be American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757 traveling from Washington to Los Angeles. 64 people were on board.
Everybody out! Everybody out! Come on, guys. Go.
At the White House, news crews and White House staff scrambled as an evacuation order was given. All federal offices in Washington were ordered closed, including the Departments of Justice, State, Treasury, and Defense, and the Central Intelligence Agency. 340,000 federal employees in the Washington area were told they could go home.
And just to recap now, the 4 hijacked planes were all commercial flights, 2 belonging to American Airlines and the other 2 to United. They are the 2 largest airlines in the United States. In total, there were 266 people on board those planes. That is including passengers, pilots, and flight attendants. All are believed dead. The FAA has suspended all commercial flights in the United States at least until tomorrow, but of course that decision will be reviewed.
President Bush has ordered the military onto high alert now. He is on his way back to Washington, where he will address the nation tonight.
Earlier today in Louisiana, the president had words of reassurance for Americans and words of warning for the terrorists.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested, but make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
An anguished-looking but composed First Lady urged parents to reassure their children that they are safe. Laura Bush was supposed to address an education hearing in Washington today, but the hearing was postponed when the terrorists struck.
Our hearts and our prayers go out to the victims of this act of terrorism, and that our support goes to the rescue workers, and all of our prayers are with everyone there right now.
Breaking news now from Kabul, Afghanistan, where explosions are being heard at this hour. There is a raging fire on the horizon, and tracer fire can be seen in pictures from a CNN correspondent on video phone. A series of explosions have been heard, and it appears that the Afghan military is launching its anti-aircraft defense system. The pictures once again just in from Kabul, where a series of explosions have been heard. One correspondent in Kabul tonight says it appears to be the sound of missile explosions.
No mercy from former Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger, who spoke moments ago on CNN about what to expect next.
Only one way to begin to deal with people like this, and that is you have to kill some of them, even if they are not immediately, directly involved in this thing. We do know that the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan has mothered Osama bin Laden for years. They need to be hit, and either they need to be hit or they need to understand very quickly that they have got to stop supporting terrorism, and then make it evident that they're stopping the terrorism.
In the Middle East, today's attacks were met with celebration by Palestinians who accused the Americans of siding with Israel. Thousands of Palestinians fired guns, cheered, and danced in the streets as news of the attacks spread. The celebrations went on even as Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat condemned today's actions and said he is willing to help the U.S. find those responsible.
We are completely shocked, unbelievable.
In Israel, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon expressed his sympathy and pledged his nation's support.
At this most difficult hour, all Israelis stand as one with the American people. Our hearts are with you, and we are ready to provide any assistance at any time.
No one has claimed responsibility for the attacks. However, the Reuters news agency reports an American official who spoke on condition of anonymity says there are indications the people responsible might be linked to Osama bin Laden. The exiled Saudi is accused by the U.S. of operating a terrorist network from bases in Afghanistan, where he has been given asylum, and for masterminding previous attacks. Afghanistan's hardline government, the Taliban, condemned today's actions and rejected suggestions bin Laden was responsible, saying he does not have the facilities to carry out such an orchestrated attack.
Some Palestinians in the Mideast taking to the streets in celebration of today's attacks, but others were not celebrating.
CFDO's Carol Charles spoke with representatives of Toronto's Muslim community.
It's a religion of peace. It promotes peace.
Sad and deplorable is how Omar Farouk describes the horrible act of terrorism leveled against the United States this morning. He blames the human condition.
We are not any longer the best of God's creation. When we were created, God said he created us as the best of his creation because of our intellect. Now we have lost that status in the sight of God and in the presence of man through our evil action.
Members of Farouk's own family are among the thousands feared dead at the World Trade Center. The enemy has not yet been identified, and Farouk says the public should not denounce the Muslim community as the agent behind this terrorism act. The International Muslims Organization of Toronto will hold a special prayer service for victims of this attack on Friday afternoon at 1:15 p.m. at 65 Rexdale Boulevard. Carol Charles, CFTO News.
Here in Toronto, we cried for our American friends.
And then the fear that it could happen here struck, sending employees in Toronto's financial hub home. Austin Delaney reports.
Tears streamed down this woman's face. Like thousands of office workers in the downtown high-rises, they learned of the attack as they came to work this morning. They huddled around TV monitors and watched in horror.
It's terrifying. It definitely looks like a war to me.
The city was gripped by the attack, people stopping at every chance to get an update as the devastation became worse and worse. Pretty worse.
57 floor. Dynamic. We just wanted to get off the top of the building.
You wanted to come down?
No, we wanted to leave. Yeah, we just want to get out of here.
By 11 a.m., they began fearing that if terrorists could attack the United States with such force, they could do it here in Toronto. Companies headquartered in the city's tall buildings gave employees the option to leave. Most did.
Things are crazy right now.
Do you think you feel good about leaving?
Yeah. Get over here. Yeah.
Are you scared?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the unknown? Or?
Just the unknown.
I've got a daughter. I don't want to die.
By noon, the rush hour had begun.
We need somebody down at that end. We need somebody down that end. Tell them the people down at that end to come down here for Newmarket.
Commuters waited outside Union Station as GO and the TTC scrambled into action, trying to get buses and trains rolling early. Shops in the Eaton Centre closed in the morning. The courthouses were also shut down for security reasons. Police were clearly visible in the financial district. And at the American Consulate on University Avenue, Canadians like Elizabeth Dunlop arrived with flowers, just wanting to say how sorry she was. And while Americans mourn their losses inside the closed consulate, police in Toronto were dealing with copycat bomb threats, one at the University of Toronto. And we are live outside the U.S. Consulate on University Avenue. There's a heightened security awareness here. There are police officers from Toronto now outside. There's no word yet when the consulate will reopen. I did speak to some of the financial institutions today, and they tell me it is likely to be business as usual in the financial sector tomorrow. The TTC also saying business as usual with the rush hour traffic. At this hour at St. James Cathedral, service is just wrapping up for the dead and the wounded, and at St. Mike's on Wednesday at 5:30, a mass will be set for the dead and wounded. Andrea?
Austin, what was the mood like downtown today?
Well, Andrea, in a word, I think shock is it. When I came down here, you have to remember that when people left in the morning, they didn't know anything about it. By the time they arrived and they passed through the office buildings, they were watching TV monitors and they were seeing this devastation. And then as the day progressed, as every half hour passed, it just got worse and worse. And a lot of people just became very scared, and they were scared for their own lives. They started to think, well, what if this happened here in Toronto? If it happened in New York, which is such a short distance away, and just planes crashing into buildings, just how easy it could happen to here. And that's why I think that employers let employees go out of their own safety. They felt that they just had to go home. Andrea and Ken?
Thank you, Austin. U.S. aircraft seek refuge at Pearson International Airport.
Thousands of passengers stranded in the city are now seeking accommodations. The airspace over Pearson remains restricted. CFTO's John Musselman reports.
An American Airlines jet touched down safely at Pearson Airport today and taxied towards Terminal 3. An airport security vehicle raced to meet the plane as the passengers were taken off. The jet was diverted from U.S. airspace to Pearson Airport when all flights across North America were canceled. Peter Gregg is with the airport authority.
Is that earlier today there were in excess of 500 flights being diverted this morning. Of those 500, I think there are 100 or even less than that right now that still need to be diverted somewhere. We are accepting 20 to 25 of those.
At least 3 ambulances were stationed outside Terminal 3 to assist passengers and offer crisis counseling.
We were completely shocked to hear everything in the cab ride over here.
A second U.S. jet that was en route from Chicago to Boston was diverted to Hamilton Airport.
He handled it real well. No one panicked, but it was an emergency landing.
Airport officials say stranded passengers are being bused to hotels near the airport. The Hilton Hotel is now opening up its ballrooms, and blankets and cots are being set up to accommodate people.
It's a tough situation. We're going to have pillows and blankets and
Hopefully we won't get to that stage, but it may be to the stage where people are going to be sleeping on the floor.
I was able to find a place to stay, but now I'm going to try to find either a bus or a train back to Boston.
The airspace over Pearson has been restricted. Peel police have beefed up security at the airport, and ETF officers were stationed at entrances as a security precaution. And we are live on the south side of Pearson. We're just going to show you the situation right now as it exists. As you can see, the jets are just parked on the tarmac. The airspace over Pearson remains restricted. The only planes that will be coming in here are any planes remaining from the diversion in the U.S., but we're still not sure if that number will exceed 25. Now, as for the security situation, a busload of 4 Peel police officers went into the airport. They're helping out with immigration and customs. Police are still securing all the entrance ports around the airport as a security precaution. Reporting live, I'm John Musselman from Pearson. Now back to the studio.
Thank you, John. And this just in on the situation in Afghanistan. A U.S. official believes the series of explosions in Kabul is not the result of American action, but could be the work of Afghan opposition forces.
Back here at home, the United States has requested that Canada restrict access to all its border crossings leading to the U.S. Armed OPP officers are out in full force. Only one access point, the QEW, has been left open to traffic leading from Fort Erie to Buffalo. The other 3 access points in the Niagara area have been barricaded. Lineups at the Fort Erie border crossing are 3 kilometers long, and the wait so far has been clocked at 3 hours.
Prime Minister Jean Chrétien says he is horrified by the attacks and is offering any assistance that is needed in the U.S. In a written statement this morning, the Prime Minister said it is impossible to fully comprehend the evil that would have conjured up such a cowardly and depraved assault upon thousands of innocent people. And he was subdued when he spoke with reporters this afternoon, saying he has no reason to believe that Canada is in danger, but he has met with top armed forces and law enforcement officials to discuss security.
I hope that Canadians will show their solidarity with our neighbors, and the news to come when we discover the number of people who died will be probably very tragic, and it's creating a very difficult situation around the world. So I hope that I will be able to speak later on with the President of the United States.
RCMP Commissioner Giuliano Zaccardelli says terrorism is a global menace and the RCMP is doing its best to ensure people in Canada are protected. He told reporters late this afternoon that there's no intelligence information indicating Canada is a target, and it's not known whether Canada may have been used by terrorists as an entry point into the U.S. as part of today's attack.
As you know, terrorism is an international problem. It is not an American or Canadian or North American problem. It's an international problem. And at this point in time, I'm not in a position to say whether there is any relationship to Canada, other than, as I said, we have taken the necessary precaution to respond to the possible threat that might exist.
Toronto police remain on high alert, and security has been beefed up at Ontario's power plants.
Civic leaders are urging Toronto residents not to panic in the wake of the attacks, but clearly they are not taking any chances. CFTO's Paul Bliss reports.
The gates at the U.S. consulate downtown were locked immediately after the initial attacks. Toronto police and the Mounties joined American security personnel in the heightened state of defense and awareness. Ontario Power Generation spokesperson John Earl says security contingency plans are in place at all 90 power generating stations in Ontario, including Pickering and Darlington nuclear plants. Border crossings at Fort Erie, Niagara Falls, and Windsor were closed. In Toronto, off-duty police officers have been called into work and deployed into the downtown core on a high state of alert. Their job is to deal with the exodus of workers and keep watch. Toronto Mayor Mel Lastman described the attacks as the most disgusting thing he's ever seen. Lastman was asked if Toronto could cope with such a disaster.
Nobody's up to airplanes crashing into buildings. Nobody's prepared for that. We're prepared for many other things, and we're prepared for all kinds of things, and we're looking out for everything, and there's a big police presence in the streets.
Provincial police moved quickly to watch over all Ontario government buildings, and the symbol of Toronto, the CN Tower, was evacuated and closed to tourists after the attacks at the towers in New York. It's very quiet here at the waterfront. No planes coming or going from the island airport. In fact, CFTO News has learned the island airport was put on Alert 1 status today. That's heightened security, the highest level of security possible. No one gets in and no one gets out. And that footing hasn't been seen in this city since the Second World War. There aren't many boats on the harbor this evening as well, aside from the police marine boat that we see patrolling the shores, taking a close look at anything they think might be suspicious. Toronto police say the public order unit is on standby but has not been released into the street, and we'll keep you updated on the local developments as they come. Reporting live at the waterfront, I'm Paul Bliss.
Thank you, Paul. Ontario mourns the tragedy and offers a helping hand. As Leon Corby reports, Queen's Park is offering assistance to New York State.
The Operations Center of Ontario's Emergency Measures Office was activated at 11:08 this morning. While there is no known threat to Canada, it is standard procedure and precaution. While the Nerve Center is set up to deal with disasters inside Ontario, like the ice storm, this time it appears it will be used to help the province's neighbor, New York State. Today, Premier Mike Harris offered whatever help New York needs.
Our thoughts and prayers are first with the countless individuals and families whose lives have been affected by these tragedies. Their loss, their pain, their sorrow is shared by every human being everywhere.
Ontario is offering help with health care, search and rescue, disaster management, and perhaps later forensics. The Premier is also encouraging people to donate blood. But at this point, New York has not made any requests.
With any disaster such as this, it will take really some time for New York to determine exactly what they need and the scope and nature of their disaster.
Unlike other buildings in downtown Toronto, the government's Queen's Park complex continued to operate today. However, civil servants in 2 other buildings near the U.S. consulate were sent home as a security precaution. The Premier canceled 2 public events today, and this media advisory was just issued. It says due to the circumstances at hand in the U.S., the Premier's public events for this week have been put on hold until further notice. Leon Corby reporting live.
Thank you, Leon. Canadian Blood Services is asking citizens to donate blood to help today's victims.
And Torontonians are doing their part tonight. CFTO's Dana Levinson has the details if you would like to help.
Blood donor clinics across the city are jammed with people wanting to donate blood. Steve Osmack works in the Manulife Center, where one of the donor clinics is set up.
The first thing I heard, one of the tidbits, was that there's a desperate need for blood. So knowing that there's a blood donor clinic downstairs, we just talked to each other and said, well, let's go down, because we were offered the afternoon off, and why not? It's the very least I think that we can do.
Representatives from Canadian Blood Services say every unit of blood counts during a time of crisis. At this time, officials are determining if the blood collected in Toronto will be shipped to the United States or it will stay here to help with any survivors being transported to Toronto area hospitals. If you would like to donate blood, here are some of the clinics across the GTA that are scheduled to stay open until 8 o'clock this evening. Square One Mall in Mississauga, the Cedarview Community Church in Newmarket, and the Bridlewood Mall in Scarborough. To schedule an appointment or to find out where there is a clinic closest to you, you can call the Canadian Blood Services at 1-800-2-DONATE. That's 1-800-236-6283. The Canadian Red Cross is on standby to assist with the crisis, and if you would like to make a donation, you can call the Red Cross at 1-800-418-1111. Now, the toll-free number for blood services is just jammed at this time. You may get a recording, and officials there are asking people to be patient if you are wanting to donate blood. Meanwhile, representatives from the Canadian Red Cross are urging people to continue calling their local branches if they are concerned about loved ones in the United States. They want everyone to know they are just doing their best at this time to gather information. Reporting live, I'm Dana Levinson.
I'm Bill Hutchison reporting live. Now it's back to Ken and Andrea.
Thank you, Bill. There has been a great loss of paramedics in New York City today.
Now, Toronto Emergency Medical Service teams are getting ready to help. CFTO's Matet Nebris reports.
A beehive of activity as EMS crews packed advanced life support bags. 50 paramedics packed their luggage with 5 days' worth of necessities. The paramedics are standing by at EMS headquarters, ready to go south at a moment's notice. They are working under the strain of knowing that teams of fellow emergency workers have died today in Manhattan.
We've volunteered because we are concerned about the massive number of casualties that our American colleagues have suffered. Not only that, but there have been numerous line-of-duty deaths as well within the EMS and the fire and police departments down there.
10 ambulances have been stocked with additional supplies. 2 supply vans have also been loaded with everything from dressing to drugs to defibrillators. At this point, Toronto's emergency workers will either be sent to Manhattan or, more likely, to upstate New York. They would be there to support areas that have dispatched their own paramedics to help in New York City.
Now, I just talked to an EMS spokesperson. He says a stand-down decision has been made, which means the paramedics won't be going anywhere right now, but they will be ready just in case they get a phone call later on in the night. Reporting live, I'm Matet Nabras. Now, back to the desk.
Thanks, Matet. Today's events have affected people deeply and in different ways. Some felt chills, others disbelief and shock.
A Toronto trauma expert says these reactions are normal, and she offers some advice on helping children deal with their emotions. CFTO's Alicia Kay reports.
Expressions of shock and fear in downtown Toronto today as people watch the devastating images from the U.S. broadcast on a large screen TV. These feelings are normal and healthy, according to Dr. Cheryl Reguer, professor of social work and trauma researcher at the U of T. She says unlike incidents in other parts of the world, because today's events took place so close to home, people are likely to have a more personal reaction and greater sense of vulnerability.
It's very normal, as I said, to have immediate shock reactions. Following that, people might, in the short term, have some kinds of reactions like they don't feel like eating, they have difficulty falling asleep, they may have some kind of nightmares about it.
Dr. Reguer says the images on television can be especially upsetting to children, and parents should take time to reassure youngsters.
We can acknowledge to our children that something terrible has happened, to try and give our children a sense of safety around that we are not at immediate risk, that we are in a warm, loving family, that we've coped with things before, and that we're going to be okay.
Some suggestions from the Peel School Board for helping children deal with this tragedy. Explain what has happened in simple terms. Be willing to discuss your child's fears and concerns, but don't force your child to talk if they don't feel like talking. Keep your routines as normal as possible. Stick to the usual dinner time and bedtime. Emphasize that this incident is extremely rare and happened far away, and limit your child's exposure to television, especially news coverage.
And the key word is limit. Don't cut off access to the television because children will see those images elsewhere and you may not be there to answer their questions. When you do discuss this, experts suggest letting youngsters take the lead. Alicia Kay reporting live. Now back to the desk.
Thank you, Alicia. The mayor of New York City says the death toll from today's attacks on the World Trade Center will be, quote, more than any of us can bear. Rudy Giuliani says the focus now is to rescue as many people as possible. Earlier, he tried to reassure millions of badly shaken citizens.
The city of New York in the United States of America is much stronger than any group of barbaric terrorists, that our democracy, that our rule of law, that our strength and our willingness to defend ourselves will ultimately prevail. And I'd ask the people of New York City to do everything that they can to cooperate, not to be frightened, to go about their lives as normal. Everything is safe right now in the city, and the people who are doing the relief effort need all the help they can get.
World leaders are reacting with revulsion to today's attacks. Condemnation and support for the U.S. are pouring in from almost every corner of the world tonight, including from Russia, China, and Syria. In Britain, Prime Minister Tony Blair vowed to stand shoulder to shoulder with the United States and express contempt for those responsible.
As for those that carried out these attacks, there are no adequate words of condemnation.
That's on there.
10 ambulances have been stocked with additional supplies. 2 supply vans have also been loaded with everything from dressing to drugs to defibrillators. At this point, Toronto's emergency workers will either be sent to Manhattan or, more likely, to upstate New York. They would be there to support areas that have dispatched their own paramedics to help in New York City.
Now, I just talked to an EMS spokesperson. He says a stand-down decision has been made, which means the paramedics won't be going anywhere right now, but they will be ready just in case they get a phone call later on in the night. Reporting live, I'm Matet Nabras. Now back to the desk.
Thanks, Matet. Today's events have affected people deeply and in different ways. Some felt chills, others disbelief and shock.
A Toronto trauma expert says these reactions are normal, and she offers some advice on helping children deal with their emotions. CFTO's Alicia Kay reports.
Expressions of shock and fear in downtown Toronto today as people watch the devastating images from the U.S. broadcast on a large screen TV. These feelings are normal and healthy, according to Dr. Cheryl Reguer, professor of social work and trauma researcher at the U of T. She says unlike incidents in other parts of the world, because today's events took place so close to home, people are likely to have a more personal reaction and greater sense of vulnerability.
It's very normal, as I said, to have immediate shock reactions. Following that, people might, in the short term, have some kinds of reactions like they don't feel like eating, they have difficulty falling asleep, they may have some kind of nightmares about it.
Dr. Reguer says the images on television can be especially upsetting to children, and parents should take time to reassure youngsters.
We can acknowledge to our children that something terrible has happened. To try and give our children a sense of safety around that we are not at immediate risk, that we are in a warm, loving family, that we've coped with things before, and that we're going to be okay.
Some suggestions from the Peel School Board for helping children deal with this tragedy. Explain what has happened in simple terms. Be willing to discuss your child's fears and concerns, but don't force your child to talk if they don't feel like talking. Keep your routines as normal as possible. Stick to the usual dinner time and bedtime. Emphasize that this incident is extremely rare and happened far away. And limit your child's exposure to television, especially news coverage.
And the key word is limit. Don't cut off access to the television because children will see those images elsewhere and you may not be there to answer their questions. When you do discuss this, experts suggest letting youngsters take the lead. Alicia Kay reporting live. Now back to the desk.
Thank you, Alicia. The mayor of New York City says the death toll from today's attacks on the World Trade Center will be, quote, more than any of us can bear. Rudy Giuliani says the focus now is to rescue as many people as possible. Earlier, he tried to reassure millions of badly shaken citizens.
The city of New York in the United States of America is much stronger than any group of barbaric terrorists, that our democracy, that our rule of law, that our strength and our willingness to defend ourselves will ultimately prevail. And I'd ask the people of New York City to do everything that they can to cooperate, not to be frightened, to go about their lives as normal. Everything is safe right now in the city, and the people who are doing the relief effort need all the help they can get.
World leaders are reacting with revulsion to today's attacks. Condemnation and support for the U.S. are pouring in from almost every corner of the world tonight, including from Russia, China, and Syria. In Britain, Prime Minister Tony Blair vowed to stand shoulder to shoulder with the United States and express contempt for those responsible.
As for those that carried out these attacks, there are no adequate words of condemnation.
Debris is falling 2 blocks. Everything has stopped. Rescue attempts have stopped. Rescue workers cannot get into the buildings to help any more victims. That has all stopped. It is just mayhem down here, and people are walking the streets not knowing what to do.
So what's happening in terms of treating those people for trauma?
The hospital, St. Vincent's, is the closest hospital to the World Trade Centers. That is now packed. They have makeshift emergency care units that are on the corners. So when they do find a victim, they rush them over to the care unit. They give them the best care they can. They wait for the ambulance. The ambulance then takes them to another hospital.
Huge amounts of debris as we're taking a look at the photos here. What sort of an area is being cordoned off right now, Michelle?
Right now, all of Lower Manhattan is closed. Nobody in, nobody out. 2 blocks around the World Trade Center, which is a 7-building unit. 2 blocks, everybody is out. Emergency workers cannot get in.
So what's happening with the people who are there tonight?
Tonight, for Manhattaners, people who live in Manhattan, the mayor's saying, go home, be safe. People who commute in from New York, Long Island, and Westchester, all outbound vehicles are open, meaning all outbound bridges are open, all outbound tunnels, they're all open. People are just going home in droves.
What about the psychological aspects, Michelle?
Oh, I mean, you know, it's just, people can't even talk about it. You see people on the street, they're crying, they're hugging each other. People are calling home, telling loved ones they're okay. It's just, I don't think it's really set in, and people just don't understand the impact.
The tops of the World Trade Centers, among other things, also has the antennas for a number of broadcasting outlets. One would assume those were thrown off the air when the crashes occurred.
That's correct, but a lot of our on-air outlets have cable outlets. So a lot of the on-air, like Channel 5, Channel 4, Channel 2, they were able to go to cable. Also, you can get, they have other receive sites. So they were able to get on the air very quickly. Michelle
Williams speaking with us from New York. Good luck, Michelle. Our thoughts, our prayers are with you.
Thank you.
World financial markets were rocked in reaction to the attack on New York City and Washington. Mike Eppel has the details in tonight's business report. Mike, first of all, I guess I want to ask you, what can you tell us about Canadian bank employees who work in New York?
Yeah, the first word we've got from a number of the Canadian companies with operations in the financial district. We have not heard any reports of any casualties yet, so that's a bit of good news. But again, there are this is still unfolding, so we will have to wait and see. But the initial report is no Canadian injuries specifically. But the financial ramifications of this, Andrea, are just huge today. We saw limited trading at the Toronto stock market and overseas in Europe following the attack in New York this morning. And in 1 hour's trading at the TSE before trading was halted, the TSE 300 Composite Index was down 296 points. The Toronto Stock Exchange will be holding a management meeting at 6:30 tomorrow morning to try to decide whether or not to reopen for business in the wake of today's events. Now, the price for oil surged by 13% to over $31 a barrel U.S. in London trading. OPEC issued a statement saying it will take steps to stabilize the market. The Wall Street markets themselves will remain closed tomorrow. In fact, there's talk now the New York Stock Exchange will be closed until at least next Monday. Obviously, the financial district in Lower Manhattan has been devastated. The New York Stock Exchange is located about 1 kilometer away from the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center itself was home to a number of top financial companies. Brokerage house Morgan Stanley was the biggest among 350 tenants in that building, or the two buildings. Incidentally, a private New York real estate company called Silverstein Properties bought a 99-year lease to control the World Trade Center just 3 months ago from the New York Port Authority. At the time, it was the biggest real estate transaction ever, valued at $3.2 billion U.S. Other things to consider from today's events from an economic perspective, this could be the catalyst to push the U.S. economy into a recession.
But it throws into question the effectiveness of the security arrangements at the U.S. airports. Right now, these security arrangements are the responsibility of the air carriers, and they contract out for these services. There apparently was a great failure at 3 separate airports within a very short period of time.
So how are things going to change? What am I going to see as a traveling passenger?
Well, I think there's going to be 2 things that will take place. One is there's going to be a complete review of security procedures. The second is I wouldn't be surprised if the United States didn't move towards nationalizing the security at airports so that there was a higher level of security.
So I could expect 3-hour delays at the airport now where normally it would have been 2?
Well, I think when they tell you to get there 2 hours or 3 hours before, you ought to take that seriously. And I think now the traveling public after this tragic day are going to say that's just fine with me.
Peter Goltz with APCO, former managing director with National Transportation Safety Board. Thank you, sir.
We have a 1-800 number for people concerned about relatives. Canadians who are concerned can call the Department of Foreign Affairs. The number is 1-800-387-3124. That is a 24-hour number for Canadians concerned about relatives who may have been affected by today's terrorism.
Repercussions from the terrorist attack are being felt right around the world. Major events have been canceled, not just for security reasons, but also out of respect for the dead. Here's Pat Foran.
Toronto's International Film Festival canceled screenings today following the terrorist attacks. Press conferences were canceled with celebrities, and events for the rest of the festival will be worked out on a day-to-day basis.
We have decided at this point in time that we shall continue.
The Emmy Awards, television's highest honors, scheduled for Sunday, have been postponed out of respect for the victims and their families. So have the Latin Grammy Awards planned for tonight in Los Angeles. Major League Baseball has canceled its schedule of 15 games tonight. The PGA has halted Thursday's start of the World Golf Championships, and the NFL plans to adjust its schedule as well. The Walt Disney Company shut down its theme parks in Florida and California. The Detroit headquarters of Ford, Daimler, Chrysler, and General Motors were closed today, along with the Space Needle in Seattle. Many Toronto events have been canceled tonight, including the Suzanne Somers Living with Breast Cancer presentation at the Metro Toronto Convention Center. Pat Foran, CFTO News.
Well, Dave Duvall joins us now for a brief update on the Toronto area forecast. Dave?
And apart from the chance of a few scattered showers, our weather picture is going to be fairly benign tonight. Mainly clear skies, few cloudy periods. Tomorrow starts out sunny. Oh, by the way, the overnight low in Metro will be around 13 to the north, and Cottage Country about 8. Tomorrow starts out sunny, increasing cloudiness, chance of a shower in the afternoon, 26 degrees. Then on Thursday, the temperature takes a real dip down to 18 with a mixture of sun and cloud, and again, the chance of showers, but nothing really to speak of, apart from the chance.
Thanks, David. Well, that concludes our special local coverage of America Under Attack. I'm Andrea Case.
And I'm Ken Shaw. We now return to ongoing CTV Network News coverage. Please stay with CTV throughout the night. We'll be back to update local developments at 11:30.